coming up in all angles, months of investigations, then early morning raids, high-profile arrests, while the country waits to find out what's next. And thank you so much. And joining us in studio, in fact, to discuss some of the related issues in relation to this matter, we have Queen's Counsel Caroline Hay, we have attorney, former government minister, and one of our hosts on RGR's hotline, Clive Mullings, and human rights advocate, Susan Goff. Before we go to them, though, Giovanni Dennis has this overview.
The pre-dawn raids and subsequent arrests of former Information and Education Minister Ruel Reid, his wife and his daughter, Principal of the Caribbean Maritime University Professor Fritz Pinnock, and the Counsellor for the Brownstown Division in St. Anne, Kim Brown-Lawrence, dominated headlines today. The developments followed months of investigation by detectives from the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency MOCA, the Financial Investigation Division, and the Counter-Terrorism and Organized Crime Division CTOC. Today, dozens of police officers converged simultaneously on Mr. Reid's house in St. Andrew, Professor Pinnock's home in Helsher, and Miss Brown-Lawrence's residence in St. Anne. The country had been anxiously awaiting an update on investigations since the Director of Public Prosecutions, Paula Llewellyn, revealed in July that she had sent an opinion to the Financial Investigation Division. She said 4 criminal laws may have been breached and that there may have also been administrative breaches. The investigations were allegedly triggered by reports that a woman had been withdrawing large sums of money at a financial institution in New Kingston. 3 months earlier, on March 20, Prime Minister Andrew Holness had fired Mr. Reid from his cabinet posts. Mr. Reid also resigned from the Senate. According to the Prime Minister, he had met with Mr. Reid, quote, regarding certain allegations in the public domain, and asked for his resignation. Subsequent sittings of Parliament's Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, PAAC, raised concerns about operations at the Caribbean Maritime University and the use of public funds. CMU President Fritz Pinnock took voluntary leave in July to allow investigations to proceed. The PAAC focused closely on contracts awarded by the CMU, including a $20 million consultancy contract for Gail Donwell Campbell, who was working for both the CMU and the National Education Trust. 2 of Mr. Reid's helpers and his driver were also alleged to have received contracts from the CMU. They have denied knowledge of any such contracts.
Okay, and the attorney representing the counsel for the Brownstown Division, Kim Brown-Lawrence, did confirm to us earlier that she has been charged with criminal possession of property and conspiracy to defraud and is expected to appear in court tomorrow. And it's a developing story, so as information comes in, we'll bring it to you throughout the program. But let's start out with some of the related issues here. Caroline, here, let me start with you, because this is always going to be a difficult situation. A high-profile investigation, the public watching, pressuring investigators, pressuring prosecutors, and the need to be fair to all parties. Do you have any concerns in terms of how the matter has been handled?
I expressed some concerns earlier in the year because there seemed to have been sort of a push, probably driven as much by the media as the public, for a lot of public discussion of what the content of the investigations were, what was the nature of the allegations. And I expressed my concerns and invited pause in the discussions, because we know that investigations are very sensitive to exposure. And you don't want to chill witnesses, you don't want to scare people, and you don't want documents to grow legs and walk. So you want to keep your investigations as quiet as possible.
And shred themselves.
Correct. But I did say at the time, the position will change when charges are laid, because trials are public events. Unless the law permits a trial to be in camera, it is in public. And so the public at that point will know exactly what the state is saying were the criminal acts committed by the persons charged, who currently are considered innocent until proven guilty. So at this stage, charges having been laid, I understand, I don't have concerns about exposure. I would imagine that the investigators feel and the charging officers feel that they're at a stage now where they can expose what they have, because once you charge, the clock begins to tick, and you need to make sure that your case gets ready for trial within a reasonable time. So I'm not so concerned about exposure now.
Okay, Clive?
Initially, I was concerned because of the fact being someone in the public domain and being a kind of cause celeb or big case, and persons would have different agendas, some genuine, wanting to know what is happening, others would want debating points for obvious reasons, and of course, the fact of the matter is, if you want to have an investigation that is done efficiently, then you allow time for it to take place. I was concerned that there seemed to have been an emphasis on getting this thing done quickly. Why is it dragging so long? And for me, I took comfort in that because I believe that the thoroughness of an investigation has to be clearly informed by what they have and what they're trying to get. And you don't want to appeal to public sentiment or political sentiment and jeopardize an investigation. Because at the end of the day, it does come down to the liberty of the subject. It comes down to finding those persons who are guilty. And I was concerned, and I still have some reservation that maybe some things in the public domain ought not to be there and could cause issues where the investigation or a trial is concerned. I raised that in relation to the PAAC. I was very concerned about some things that were highlighted, and I expect them to do their job, but I was also concerned about the media, where persons who were deemed to be witnesses, potential witnesses, were giving interviews. Now that I found alarming, because that evidence, if it is evidence, if they come to court, can be challenged based on utterances made and so on and so forth. That being in the public domain was regrettable. And I think that those are some of the misgivings that I have had, but we wait to see what they're going to bring to the fore now.
Just how would you have that dealt with, though?
I think, quite frankly...
Because if I hear your name called at PAC, I'm going to call you up and say, hey, Clive, come talk to us.
Yes.
They said publicly that you did X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
So how should that be handled instead? Does the prosecutor say you don't speak? Was the person to know that? Is the media to be hands off, which, you know, is unlikely? How should that
I
be
think that the media needs to be guided a bit more. We know the need to get the scoop, and of course the tension and the competition in media. But they have to be made aware of the processes. It's important, for instance, if someone is a potential witness, my view is it should be hands off. Why? Because if you find that you go ahead, you interview this person, you get details, you can jeopardize something else, and you weigh the public interest as against the interest of having a fair trial, and that is something that we need to be aware of, because while we speak of a fair trial and the constitutional right to a fair trial, someone can raise that issue in a trial and say, listen, I cannot get a fair trial based on the things that have happened, the pre-trial publicity, and that can upend an entire investigation on the case.
Coming back to a couple of issues, but let me bring in Susan Goff.
I think that, again, we're in a situation where there is a case, an investigation that's going on about a matter that is of great public interest, and quite rightly so, there's going to be that desire on the part of the public to know what's going on. And I think that there is a need, yes, to recognize that investigations may be at sensitive points, that there is information that should not be in the public arena at that point. And I think it calls on those who are in charge of the various agencies involved to have a very clearly defined strategy for disseminating public information, that there is a need for periodic or at particular points public updates on the status of the case, not giving details, not giving information that is likely to prejudice the case, etc., but to let the public know that this has not fallen into file 13, that no, it's not a 9-day wonder. Yes, an investigation of this complexity may take a longer time than you would want, but this is the nature of it. It is still ongoing. And that, I think, there is a need to understand and to handle that more carefully and more intentionally, because the public does want to know. And too often we have seen instances where there have been issues that needed thorough investigation, that needed something to happen. and we wait and they sort of fade away, disappear, nothing happens. So there is a lack of trust in the system that needs to be understood.
But here's a funny question. Should we know, Caroline, that there are investigations taking place at all?
So it's actually a good question, and I shouldn't say that because Dion only asks good questions. There are some cases that Susan is quite right. They are unique because of the personalities involved and because of the issues that they deal with. If you're talking about allegations of the misappropriation of public funds, that's a public issue. There's public interest in knowing that state agencies are directing resources towards investigating with a potential view to charging for criminal conduct persons who are in high position or persons who are in positions of influence or power in society. So in a sense, there's value in knowing about the existence of an investigation. And it's important. And arguably, it could be in some sense more important than if you're investigating stealing ackee, because it's not that the crime is any different. It is the personalities that are engaged that are different. The expectations on them are higher because of the levels of trust reposed in them. So to a certain extent, it is important to know that there's equality in the system, and that if you're suspected of committing criminal offenses, whether you are high or low, resources are directed towards investigating that allegation of crime.
Hold that thought for me. Let me go to the break. We'll come back in just a moment. Remember, our hashtag is TVJ, all angles. We're back in a moment.